It was always tough, but I enjoyed it. I enjoy it. Like I know I'm going to enjoy it here because it's just...
Behind the gates of Graceland, home of the king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley rests a quieter part of his legacy, his private garage. For decades, it remained untouched, sealed in time. But when its doors finally opened, what stood inside wasn't just a collection of cars. It was a portrait of the man behind the legend. In this video, we explore Elvis's garage, from the famous pink Cadillac to the powerful Stutz Blackhawk and the humble Jeeps he drove for peace, each vehicle telling a story. The Graceland Estate. Graceland was located at Elvis Presley Boulevard in Memphis, Tennessee, became Elvis's home in 1957, and eventually his final resting place. Over time, Elvis transformed the house with bold personal touches: pool, racquetball court, layers of memorabilia, and yes, an ambitious garage to house his growing car mania. Graceland was more than a mansion. It is a shrine, museum, business, and home. When Elvis died on August 16, 1977, he left instructions in his will for a trust structure. His father, Vernon Presley, was named executor and trustee. Beneficiaries included Vernon, Elvis's grandmother Minnie Mae, and his only child, Lisa Marie, whose share was to be held in trust until she turned 25. Vernon died in 1979, and Graceland's stewardship required new hands. Priscilla Presley was named a trustee, joining the National Bank of Commerce in Memphis and Elvis's accountant Joseph Hanks. In the years following Elvis's death, Graceland was bleeding money, maintenance was expensive, tax bills enormous. Priscilla led the bold move to open Graceland to the public. On June 7, 1982, Graceland officially became a museum. This move was transformative. Within a few weeks, the operation recouped its opening investment. Graceland became the engine that would sustain Elvis's legacy beyond his life. To manage the commercial side of Elvis's name and properties, the Elvis Presley Trust created Elvis Presley Enterprises, EPE. This corporate entity handled licensing, merch, shows, media rights, and oversaw the museum and Graceland operations. In 2005, facing financial pressures, Lisa Marie Presley sold about 85% of EPE to CKX, later Authentic Brands Group, while retaining personal ownership of the Graceland house, grounds, and Elvis's personal effects. So from that point, the business and commercial structures, licensing, global Elvis branding, were largely external or under new corporate partners. Meanwhile, the physical heart, Graceland mansion, memorabilia, the cars remained in the Presley family's control. In 2023, when Lisa Marie passed away, a legal process followed. Her eldest daughter, Riley Keough, was eventually confirmed by court to be sole trustee and owner of Graceland and the Promenade Trust that operates the estate. A strange twist happened when a company called Nosany Investments claimed that Lisa Marie had taken a loan with Graceland as collateral and sought to auction it. Riley Keough challenged this as fraudulent. Courts blocked the auction, and Nosany withdrew claims. Thus, Graceland stays in family hands for now, with the core physical assets under Riley Keough's stewardship. Now let's turn to something many fans love but few fully inspect: Elvis's garage, car collection, and how that side has been preserved and transformed. Elvis's passion for cars was legendary. He bought on impulse, customized endlessly, and gifted vehicles freely. Today, Graceland's automotive collection is one of its richest attractions. Stay tuned as we delve into the automotive world of Elvis Presley. Garage at Graceland. Architecturally, Graceland includes a one-story wing of stucco that originally housed a four-car garage. That wing was appended to the main structure. Over time, Elvis expanded his automotive ambitions beyond that original garage. But as his car collection burgeoned, the original home garage couldn't contain it all. Many cars were stored off-site, in additional buildings, or in what later became the dedicated Elvis Presley Automobile Museum, also called Presley Motors. The current garage visitors see as less a functional repair shop and more a curated exhibit space, where classic Elvis vehicles are preserved, displayed, and rotated for public viewing. Elvis reportedly owned more than 100 vehicles in his lifetime. Many of these survive and are now part of the Graceland Car Museum. Every vehicle in the collection is maintained meticulously with climate controls, restoration efforts, and careful rotation so each car remains as close to Elvis's usage condition as possible. Many are displayed in 3 large rooms in the car museum across the street from the main mansion. Let's look at the most fascinating vehicles found in the garage. The third car will marvel you, the pink Cadillac. Right inside the Graceland garage was one of the most recognizable cars in American history, Elvis Presley's pink Cadillac. Even after decades, the car still looked special. Its soft pink paint had faded slightly, but the chrome trim still caught the light, and its curves seemed to tell a story of their own. The car was a 1955 Cadillac Fleetwood Series 60, and it had been one of Elvis's earliest symbols of success. Back in 1955, he was just beginning to rise as a singer. He had recorded Baby Let's Playhouse and was spending long nights on the road, traveling between small shows across the South. His first Cadillac, a blue one, had caught fire during a tour, and instead of giving up, he decided to replace it with something better, something brighter. He ordered the new one in pink, a color that stood out from anything else on the road. It wasn't just pink, though. The shade was custom, later known as Elvis Rose. The color captured his personality, bold, warm, and impossible to ignore. Not long after he bought it, Elvis decided to give the car to his mother, Gladys Presley. She didn't have a driver's license and never actually drove it, but that wasn't the point. For Elvis, giving her the Cadillac was his way of showing how far they had come from their days of struggle in Tupelo. He wanted her to have something beautiful, something that showed she no longer had to worry. Neighbors would often see the car parked proudly outside their home. It was the kind of car that made people stop and look, a reminder that a poor boy from Mississippi had turned his dream into reality. To many, the pink Cadillac became a symbol of hope, proof that hard work and faith could take you anywhere. Elvis loved driving it too. On quiet evenings, he'd sometimes take it out around Memphis, the radio turned low, the city lights reflecting off the hood. For him, driving meant freedom, a rare moment where he could escape the noise of fame and feel like himself again. The car itself was impressive for its time. It had a 5-liter V8 engine, automatic transmission, and wide white-wall tires that made it stand out even more. The interior was two-tone leather, soft and comfortable, with chrome accents on the dashboard. Back then, the Cadillac cost around $4,000, a small fortune in 1955, equal to about $45,000 today. But its true value wasn't in money. Over the years, the pink Cadillac became more than a car. It turned into a part of Elvis's image. Fans recognized it instantly, and soon it was showing up in photographs, films, and even lyrics by other artists. After his death, it was restored and displayed at the Presley Automobile Museum in Graceland, where it remains one of the most visited exhibits. Collectors have estimated that if it ever went to auction, it could easily sell for over $1 million. But Graceland has never considered letting it go. The car is too closely tied to Elvis's story, the beginning of his fame, his love for his mother, and the joy of giving. Beneath all the dust, the car still shined. It wasn't just a vehicle. It was the start of everything, the symbol of a young man's dreams, still standing long after he was gone, the Stutz Blackhawk. Next to the pink Cadillac sat a car that looked nothing like it, darker, sharper, and much more serious. Its long hood stretched forward like the nose of a jet, and the chrome trim reflected what little light managed to slip through the dust. It was the Stutz Blackhawk, one of Elvis Presley's most luxurious and personal cars. Where the pink Cadillac represented his youth and generosity, the Stutz showed the other side of Elvis, the man who had already tasted fame, fortune, and the loneliness that came with both. The first Stutz Blackhawk was made in 1970, a time when Elvis's life was changing fast. He was older now, more private, and his fame had grown beyond what anyone could imagine. He was performing in Las Vegas, selling out shows night after night, and his love for fast, stylish cars never faded. The Stutz was different from anything else he owned. It wasn't about color or flash. It was about power, comfort, and exclusivity. Elvis bought his first Blackhawk in 1971. In fact, he was one of the first people in the world to own one. The car was hand-built in Italy and finished in the United States, combining European design with American strength. It had a 7.5-liter V8 engine and could reach speeds close to 130 miles per hour, which was impressive for such a heavy car. Inside, it was pure luxury hand-stitched leather seats, real gold trim, and a dashboard made from rare wood. The car cost him around $26,500 at the time, which was more than some houses in Memphis. Today, that would be over $200,000, and the early models like Elvis's are now considered priceless. He drove the Stutz often, especially at night. Neighbors and friends said they'd see him slipping out of Graceland quietly, usually dressed in dark clothes, sunglasses on, even after sunset. The Stutz became his escape vehicle, the one he used when he wanted to be alone. When he didn't want to be Elvis Presley, the superstar, but just Elvis, the man who loved the open road. Sometimes he drove it down Elvis Presley Boulevard past the quiet houses and the lights of Memphis fading behind him. Other times he'd take it out to the edge of town, where the streets were empty and the only sound was the hum of the engine. For him, that was peace, just the road, the stars, and the sound of music playing low from the radio. He owned several Stutz Blackhawks over the years, black, white, maroon, each slightly different, but all carrying the same spirit of elegance and strength. One of his favorite moments was showing them to friends. He'd talk about the engine, the smoothness of the drive, and how the car made him feel safe and free. One of his Stutz cars, a 1971 model, is believed to have been the last vehicle he ever drove before his death in 1977. It's said that he returned home to Graceland in it the night before he passed away. That detail gave the car a special place in Elvis history. Today, one of his Blackhawks is preserved at Graceland, restored to its original condition, the deep black paint polished to a mirror finish, the gold details gleaming once again. Visitors often stop and stare a little longer at this one. It doesn't have the bright color or warmth of the pink Cadillac, but it has a quiet kind of power. It feels like the car of a man who had seen the world and was still searching for something real. When the garage doors opened after decades, the Stutz was covered in a thick coat of dust, but even then it stood out. Its bold lines and low shape made it look ready to move, even after all those silent years. For those who saw it that day, it wasn't just another car. It was a reminder of Elvis's private world, the side that few people ever got to see. The Rolls-Royce and Mercedes era. After the Stutz Blackhawk came the cars that truly showed how far Elvis Presley had come. The Rolls-Royce and the Mercedes era. These were not cars for quick drives or flashy entrances. They were statements. They told the world that the boy from Tupelo had reached the top, that he could now own the kind of machines once reserved for kings and movie stars. The first Rolls-Royce he bought was a 1956 Rolls-Royce Phantom V, painted in a beautiful shade of midnight blue. At that time, Elvis was only in his early 20s, already one of the biggest names in America. The car was massive, long, heavy, and silent, almost like a moving room. Inside, it had lamb wool carpets, a built-in radio, and seats that felt more like couches. When Elvis first saw it in the showroom, he reportedly smiled and said, "That's the kind of car a man could get married in." It wasn't just about the car's luxury, it was about what it meant. To Elvis, owning a Rolls-Royce meant he had made it. It was the dream of every Southern boy who had grown up with nothing and now had everything. He drove the Rolls-Royce often in the early years, especially around Memphis. But he was also known for being generous, almost too generous. Many stories say he would lend it out to friends, family, even members of his band. If someone admired it, he might just hand them the keys and tell them to enjoy it for a while. That was the kind of man he was. Years later, as his fame grew, Elvis bought another Rolls-Royce. This time a 1963 Phantom V, finished in silver. This one came with all the upgrades: air conditioning, power windows, a record player, and a phone. He used it to travel between Graceland and the airport whenever he had to fly out for shows or movies. Photographs from that time show him stepping out of the car in a sharp suit, sunglasses on, waving to fans who had waited just to catch a glimpse. In those moments, the Rolls-Royce wasn't just transportation. It was part of the image. The king of rock and roll arriving in royal style. But behind that glamour, the man inside the car often longed for peace. While fans saw luxury and fame, Elvis often saw isolation. The tinted windows and quiet engine made it easy for him to disappear, even when surrounded by people. Sometimes he'd just drive through the night, not to go anywhere, but simply to think. By the early 1970s, Elvis's taste in cars shifted again. He discovered something new, the Mercedes-Benz 600, a German luxury sedan famous for being the choice of presidents and popes. The Mercedes 600 was powerful, elegant, and expensive. At the time, it cost nearly $25,000, which would be close to $200,000 today. Elvis bought one in 1970, finished in black, and instantly fell in love with it. This car was different. It wasn't soft or quiet like the Rolls-Royce, it had presence. When Elvis pulled up in it, people noticed. The 600 had a massive 6.3-liter V8 engine, hydraulic doors that closed silently with a push of a button, and suspension so smooth it felt like floating. Elvis often used it for his Las Vegas trips, where he performed nightly shows at the International Hotel. There's a famous story that one night after a show, Elvis invited some of his friends and band members for a ride in the Mercedes. He told them to buckle up, then hit the gas, laughing as the car surged forward down the Las Vegas Strip. "Feels like flying, doesn't it?" he shouted. That was Elvis, always chasing that same rush, the same feeling of freedom that had driven him since his first car. Over the years, he owned several Mercedes models, the 600 Pullman limousine, the 280 SL convertible, and even a few smaller sedans for his staff. He enjoyed testing them all, but the black Mercedes 600 remained his favorite. Each car holds a chapter of that story. The Rolls-Royce, young, bright, full of hope. The Mercedes, older, heavier, carrying the weight of the crown. Both still sit at Graceland, polished now, their engines long silent but their presence unmistakable, reminders of a man who lived fast, gave freely, and left behind more than music. Not every car in Elvis Presley's collection was built for show or luxury. Some were built for comfort, reliability, and the feeling of freedom that came with being behind the wheel with no cameras around. Away from the limelight, Elvis enjoyed driving just like anyone else. He loved the open road, the quiet of early mornings, and the sound of engines echoing across the Tennessee countryside. Among the cars tucked away in his Graceland garage, three types stood out for being deeply personal: his Lincolns, his Jeeps, and his motorcycles. They weren't just vehicles. They were small pieces of the life he never fully got to live. The Lincoln's classic comfort and Southern elegance. Elvis's connection with Lincoln began early in his career. Before Rolls-Royce and Mercedes, Lincoln represented true American luxury, big, bold, and smooth. The first one he owned was a 1955 Lincoln Continental Mark II, one of the most stylish cars of its time. At the time of its release, the Continental Mark II cost around $10,000, which was more expensive than most Cadillacs and rivaled the Rolls-Royce in price. Elvis admired the car's clean design and the way it seemed to glide on the road. He bought it soon after Heartbreak Hotel topped the charts, marking his transition from a young rockabilly singer to a national celebrity. He often drove it around Memphis and sometimes parked it outside Sun Records, where fans gathered hoping to catch a glimpse of him. The Mark II's interior was pure elegance, hand-fitted leather, deep carpeting, and a dashboard trimmed in chrome and glass. But what Elvis liked most was how it was handled. It was quiet and powerful, letting him drive for hours without drawing too much attention. Later, he added a 1960 Lincoln Continental Mark V to his growing collection. This car was larger, heavier, and fitted with a 7-liter V8 engine. It had every modern feature available at the time: power steering, power windows, and air conditioning. All luxuries few cars offered back then. Elvis used it for family trips and long drives with his friends. It was known as the Memphis Mafia. During the 1960s, he also owned a 1969 Lincoln Mark III, painted in a deep metallic blue. This one reflected his mature taste, sleek, strong, and confident. He used it frequently during the filming of Change of Habit, and around the time he made his comeback in Las Vegas. The Lincolns were less flashy than his Cadillacs, but they represented balance. They were cars of quiet success, not excess. To those close to him, the Lincolns showed the part of Elvis that was still rooted in the South. A man who appreciated craftsmanship, comfort, and the feel of the open road. The Jeep's a soldier's spirit. Elvis's love for Jeeps came from his time in the U.S. Army. In 1958, when he was drafted, he served in Germany as part of the 3rd Armored Division. There, he developed a fondness for military vehicles, especially Jeeps, which were used for transport across rugged terrain. He admired their strength, simplicity, and reliability. When he returned home, he didn't forget that connection. One of the first vehicles he bought after his military service was a 1958 Willys Jeep CJ5, customized with a white exterior and blue interior. He drove it around the Graceland grounds, often with friends or family riding along. The CJ5 had a small but capable 4-cylinder engine, a short wheelbase, and high ground clearance, perfect for off-road adventures. Elvis loved using it to drive across his property, especially near the back fields where he could relax without being watched. In the 1970s, he upgraded to a Jeep CJ7, painted in a bright green color. It had larger tires, a removable roof, and a slightly more powerful engine. This was the Jeep he used most often for fun drives with his daughter, Lisa Marie. They would take short rides around the Graceland estate, and sometimes Elvis would let her sit on his lap and help steer. Unlike his Rolls-Royce or Mercedes, the Jeep had no luxury or polish. It was raw and real, a reminder of his military days and the simplicity he missed. The contrast between the king of rock and roll and a dusty off-road Jeep said a lot about him. Beneath the fame, Elvis was still a man who enjoyed simple moments and the freedom to go wherever the road took him. One of his Jeeps, a 1973 Jeep CJ5, was later customized with a white exterior, blue seats, and chrome accents. It became one of the most popular exhibits at Graceland after restoration. When visitors see it, they often smile, not because it's fancy, but because it feels like something he truly loved for himself, not for the spotlight. The motorcycle's speed, freedom, and escape. If cars were Elvis's luxury, motorcycles were his escape. He owned dozens of them throughout his life, from small Harleys to big touring bikes. For him, riding wasn't about showing off, it was about feeling alive. One of his earliest bikes was a 1956 Harley-Davidson KH, a powerful sport model that matched his rebellious image perfectly. He often rode it around Memphis before fame made it impossible to do so freely. The KH had a 55 cubic inch V-twin engine and could hit nearly 100 miles per hour. It was fast, loud, and full of character, just like him. Later, he upgraded to larger touring models. The 1957 Harley-Davidson FLH Duo Glide became one of his favorites. It was smooth and reliable with a comfortable seat and chrome finish. Elvis used it for long rides on the outskirts of Memphis, sometimes accompanied by friends from his inner circle. By the late 1960s, his collection had grown to include several Harley-Davidson Electra Glides and even some Triumph and Honda models. One of his most famous bikes was the 1976 Harley-Davidson FLH 1200 Electra Glide, which he purchased just a year before his death. It was painted in blue and silver with a large windshield and saddlebags. That Electra Glide was more than just another purchase. It represented his lifelong love for the open road. Even as fame closed in on him, the motorcycle gave him a sense of freedom that few things could. There were nights when he'd take off from Graceland quietly, riding through Memphis with only a few close friends. The city lights would blur behind him, the wind cutting through the silence, just Elvis and the night. After his passing, the Electra Glide was preserved and later sold at auction, fetching nearly $800,000. It remains one of the most valuable motorcycles ever connected to a musician. The Lincolns, Jeeps, and motorcycles showed a different side of Elvis Presley. Not the king in gold suits, but the man who craved peace, motion, and control. Each of these vehicles had a story that spoke to his need for balance. The Lincolns represented comfort and elegance, a quiet reminder of his roots. The Jeeps connected him to his military service and his love for the outdoors. The motorcycles gave him what fame often took away: freedom. Elvis Presley's less-known collections. One of the most fascinating stories hidden among Elvis Presley's collection of vehicles is the tale of his 1948 Chevrolet panel truck. Unlike his pink Cadillacs and flashy Lincolns that screamed fame and fortune, this old Chevy was deliberately plain. Elvis used it for one simple reason: to go unnoticed. When he wanted to escape the constant eyes of fans or take quiet drives around Memphis, this unassuming truck became his disguise. It offered him a kind of freedom his fame had taken away. The panel truck was rugged, painted in a dull factory shade, and had no special markings. Locals who saw it on the road would never have guessed that the man behind the wheel was the king of rock and roll himself. In a way, it represented the side of Elvis that longed for normalcy, for small-town moments away from the spotlight. After his death in 1977, the Chevy was discovered tucked away in one of Graceland's storage areas, layered in dust and time. Yet even in its worn state, it carried a quiet dignity. The panel truck tells a far more intimate story, that even the biggest star in the world sometimes wanted nothing more than to drive unnoticed down an empty road. Among the gleaming chrome and American classics in Elvis Presley's collection, one car stood out like a piece of European art: his Ferrari Dino 308 GT4. It wasn't the kind of car most would associate with Elvis. He was known for Cadillacs, Lincolns, and Thunderbirds, bold symbols of American excess. But the Ferrari told a different story. It showed how far his tastes had evolved and how his fame had reached across the Atlantic. The Dino 308 GT4 was sleek, fast, and unmistakably Italian. Its wedge-shaped body, designed by Bertone, carried a sharp contrast to the curvy, chrome-heavy cars Elvis grew up loving. Powered by a V8 engine, it was a machine built for precision, not show. For Elvis, it wasn't just about speed, it was about style, sophistication, and a connection to a world that seemed far from Memphis. Friends often recalled how Elvis admired the way the Ferrari handled, its quiet confidence on the road, and the way it seemed to float through corners. To him, it wasn't just a car, it was a symbol of reaching beyond boundaries, of blending his southern roots with international flair. The Ferrari stood as proof that Elvis's ambitions and curiosities were global. It was the king's subtle way of saying he could belong anywhere, even on the winding roads of Italy. Each car carried a piece of Elvis Presley's story. The pink Cadillac, bright and generous, represented the dreamer who loved to share his success. The Stutz Blackhawk reflected the man of wealth and solitude, the one who sought peace in the quiet hum of an engine. The Rolls-Royce and Mercedes showed the icon who had achieved everything the world could offer, yet found comfort only in motion. And then there were the Lincolns, Jeeps, and motorcycles, the truest glimpse of the man behind the fame. Over the years, some of the cars have been restored, displayed behind velvet ropes, their engines cleaned, and their paint polished to a mirror finish. But even in their perfection, they carry the same quiet power. A reminder that fame may fade, but legacy endures. In the end, Graceland's garage became more than a storage space. It became a museum of motion and memory. Every car inside whispers a chapter of his life. Every steering wheel once held by hands that changed music forever. If you enjoyed this dive into Graceland's afterlife and the King's automotive realm, hit like, click the subscribe button so you get notified of videos like this.